Hey everyone, it's Bob. In this episode of Elevate Your AIQ, I am joined by Dr. Shiran Danoch, CEO and founder of Informed Decisions, an interview intelligence platform, to discuss the fascinating world of AI in the hiring process. We explore the importance of data driven and skills based hiring, as well as the challenges and opportunities in using AI to mitigate bias and improve decision making. Shiran shares valuable insights on responsible AI implementation, her favorite AI tools, and of course offers advice on upskilling in this rapidly evolving field. Join us for an enlightening conversation that delves into the future of recruitment, how AI is reshaping the way we approach talent acquisition and management. I hope you enjoy the discussion. Thanks for tuning in.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I'm your host, Bob Pulver. With me today is Shiran Danoch from Informed Decisions. Hi, Shiran. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm very excited to be here, Bob.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. Thanks so much for spending some time with me. As a way of introduction, why don't you just give our listeners a little bit of background about how you got into IO psychology and people analytics and the HR tech space?
Sure. So I'm an organizational psychologist. Actually went into the psychology world just from, the basic desire to help people. That's what I knew, I think, from being very little. But what I didn't know is that I also love data and that there are so many aspects of the human capability that you can measure and assess. So learning psychology, my master's degree, like that kind of opened up a whole new world for me. So that's kind of, it shaped already during my studies, but it became even stronger during my career, which I started as a consultant, building customized assessments for different companies. After several years of doing that and really owning on the expertise on how to design talent assessments, candidates assessment selection processes, I did feel that something is missing for me. Doing consulting, you can create great impact, but on a relatively small number of organizations. And I felt, hey, I want to take my knowledge and I want to help companies at scale. And that's kind of when I started to understand that this could be done through technology. It was the early ages of machine learning and AI. It just started, but then I kind of understood the potential and kind of gradually made a transition from being a consultant to actually building products and technologies around people analytics and talent assessment.
Excellent. So you had a startup before Informed Decisions, is that right?
Right, right, called empirical.
Empirical. Okay. And so this informed decisions is sort of an evolution of what you were doing with that, or what do you see as the main sort of differences or the progression?
Yeah, definitely. So, empirical was my first introduction into the technology world and all of the possibilities it withholds. And there we focused on pre-hire assessments. So basically, how to screen in the best candidates based on relevant skills and building skills assessment, cognitive assessments, etc. My vision was always broader than that. As a consultant, the systems that I've built was always to incorporate data from multiple tools and multiple perspectives. It's not like I invented the wheel. There are more than 100 years of research around employee assessment and employee selection that says if you want to get an in-depth view and an accurate view of a candidate, you need to integrate multiple tools and multiple perspectives. Uh, and that's basically what we're doing at Informed Decisions. So at Informed Decisions, I'm taking the skills-based approach and basically applying it on the entire interview process, meaning how do you assess based on skills throughout the entire interview process, collect data, integrate data to make informed decisions.
So you could use informed decisions at any phase of the hiring funnel, right? It's not just for on-site interviews.
Yes, of course. At every stage, you should aim to, first of all, understand and clearly define what you're measuring, have a clear questions or any types of assessment to assess what you're aiming to measure, the skills that you're aiming to measure, and the ability to quantify that, because that will allow you as a talent professional or as a company to eventually to be able to reverse engineer your entire process. You can't manage what you don't measure. You can't have the ability to actually understand what's working in your process and what's not working if your process is not quantified. So definitely it goes well beyond your interviews, starting from how you source candidates, from which sources are working better, convert better for you, the initial screening, whether it's done through pre-hire assessments or through a phone interview or through some kind of an AI algorithm. All of these components need to be broken down and can be broken down. It's much easier to break it down today when you can do a lot of these with technology and with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. So what you're really describing is intelligence on the whole hiring funnel, right? It's
Exactly.
not necessarily just a 30-minute or hour conversation. It's how do you extract insights from each of those phases so that in aggregate, by the time you get to the end, you think you have the best sort of view of that candidate as compared to other candidates.
Exactly. And more than that, I think you can gain amazing insight just from looking at your hiring process data. But eventually, you have to close the feedback loop, meaning you have to compare your interview process data scores to actual job related KPIs. If it's retention, if it's performance, if it's engagement, whatever objective productivity measures that you have, that's the way that you close the feedback loop and actually understand which components of your interview process, whether it's skills, competencies, whatever you're assessing, and also whoever is assessing, which is actually what we're focusing on, the interviewers themselves, the decision makers, who is able to predict. And not just because we want to tap them on the back, it's because we want to learn. We want to learn from what they're doing. Who are those that are actually hiring the most qualified and diverse candidates? And what are their interview behaviors that allows them to do that? And those who are still struggling, the ones that are not that are missing the mark on the hiring, what are they doing? What are their biases that are hindering their efforts? And what feedback can we provide them in order to learn and improve for the next time?
No, that's awesome. I think there's a lot of concern. Obviously, people are concerned about bias in AI, but we can't, of course, ignore the longstanding, human biases and all the different human biases that could come into play when someone is asked to conduct an interview. And so, if we dig deeper on that side of things, I mean, what kind of advice or guidance or coaching would you give to an interviewer, and how do you track, you know, improvements in their capability? Or I mean, are you tracking from a performance management standpoint? Are you tracking each individual interviewer?
I'll start with your first point where you mentioned a lot of companies, like on the one side, they're very hyped about AI and how can we use it to streamline our processes to enhance the accuracy of our TA processes. Uh, on the other hand, there is a concern about the bias that goes inside. And it is a justified concern, but let's go back for a moment. The most of those AI algorithms are biased because they are trained on people decisions. Okay, if we're taking an algorithm and training them on recruiters or hiring managers past decisions which are biased, then of course the algorithm's decisions or recommendations will also be biased. That's why we need to go back to the source. If we want to unbias our AI, we need to unbias our people, our decision makers. And that requires an infrastructure. I know that a lot of companies are preoccupied with this and they're taking a lot of efforts in bias training, DEI training, etc. But we need to acknowledge that the key benefits of these types of training is raising awareness, and it's not creating behavioral change. There is some research around that shows it helps to raise awareness, but eventually, when I, as a hiring manager, I go and I do my interviews, I will probably default to my old ways, not because I want to continue being biased.
Before we move on, I need to let you know about my friend Mark Pfeffer and his show, People Tech. If you're looking for the latest on product development, marketing, funding, big deals happening in talent acquisition, HR, HCM, that's the show you need to listen to. Go to the Work Defined Network, search up People Tech, Mark Pfeffer. You can find him anywhere.
Most of us have good intention. We want to hire better people. We want to hire more diverse workforce. It's just because this is what I know and this is what I'm familiar with. So unless we introduce an infrastructure or a system that helps them to move from awareness to behavioral change, it will make it really hard for them to actually change. So my advice is not to the individual interviewer. I think individual interviewers, if they live within a context where they're not provided the infrastructure, they can do some things by themselves to create the infrastructure, but it will really be hard for them to create, an ecosystem change. They might change their ways, which is, a great step forward. But organizations need to think about it as an infrastructure that they need to provide. So they need to provide guidance both to recruiters and to hiring managers, which eventually it's not their day job. They're not experts in clearly defining what they want to assess and how to assess that, even if they do know what they need to assess. So that's the kind of infrastructure that we should provide them, to provide them with the ability to standardize their process, to accurately assess what they're aiming to assess, to provide them with data that they can learn from successes and failures, and to improve, because who can improve without feedback? Think about, like, how do you improve in whatever you want to do? You want to lose weight, right? So you go on a diet or you start to exercise, you get feedback. You go on a scale, you understand if you lost weight, right? Or if and now you can run for longer time periods. That all of this is feedback that you're getting in order to understand if it works or it doesn't work. But this feedback rarely exists when we're talking about talent acquisition and hiring processes. So my advice, both to individual interviewers, but more to organizations, set up an infrastructure that will allow you to understand something, to collect data and to understand something about the effectiveness of your interview practices.
What's the typical impetus for someone to, decide that informed decisions is the right solution for them? I mean, are they not meeting, DEI goals? Are they tracking quality of hire and it's below, what they expect? I mean, I imagine it's probably a range of things, but when someone comes to the realization that they need you.
First of all, I wish that companies would have come to us after saying, "Hey, I've measured our quality of hire and it's low." Usually they don't have these types of measures, or they have something very rough, but that's okay because we're here to help with that. Usually it's a sense of something is not working with my process. My managers are just winging it. We have a lot of people leaving after a short time. our candidate experience is off, the process is very lengthy, people are leaving us, I want to diversify, like we're keeping on hiring more people that just look the same, sound the same, we're not able to diversify our workforce. So these are the types of voices that we're hearing. It's around eventually, yes, increasing the quality of hire, but more from, an instinctive or an intuitive place, shortening the process or diversifying your workforce. Eventually, there are basic principles, again, not something that we've invented, just something that we're applying at scale with our technology, that tell us these are the things that have been working across multiple contexts for years, and this is what you should be applying. Of course, every company, every position has their own specific context. And that's exactly why we're measuring at that specific context and providing individual and customized recommendations.
In terms of how AI is applied in your solution, is it helping with the guidance to the interviewer, or in terms of feedback, as well as like what questions to ask based on, like you said, it's got to be specific to the role?
Yeah,
Is it also used in any type of scoring, or you still rely on the human judgment to actually, sort of score the interview on, or
that's a great
the
question.
interviewee on a character? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question because it goes back to the fine balance that most of us are struggling with, or where should we put like the human emphasis versus where we should let AI or technology do the work. For us, we are a team of expert IO psychologists. Everyone that's working on my team has been trained and skilled to develop diagnostic questions in a specific context based on scientific principles. Sometimes it seems like asking questions is easy, but there is a whole science called psychometrics behind that. And that's the science of measuring the human capability. So that is something that we are not letting AI do. We definitely consult with AI or tweak our ideas, but in many times, what you're getting out of AI is more of the same. Again, it trains on existing data. So once you ask ChatGPT or another AI to generate interview questions for you, it trains based on existing data, and then a lot of what you're getting is what's already out there, and candidates come well prepared today to interviews because everything is on Glassdoor, etc. So no, our team develops the questions and make sure that the questions are tailored to the specific position and organization and to the unique challenges of that position and organization. So that part is definitely the human part. Where the AI goes in is, first of all, in detecting the different interviewing patterns that different people have. For example, the tendency to evaluate male higher than female on specific skills, and vice versa. We actually see in the data that some skills are scored higher for male versus female and vice versa, and also for different ethnicity groups. Monitoring, is there specific times of the day where you as an interviewer tend to be more favorable towards candidates? Also, we're seeing that some interviewers, they have what we call the time of day bias. So when they're interviewing candidates in the mornings, when they're kind of fresh, so they're giving more favorable scores versus in the afternoons, that the poor candidates that are being interviewed in the afternoons get significantly lower scores. And that's consistent over time. It's not a one-time thing. So that's where we use AI. And also we transcribe the interviews, the ones that are being done video conferencing, and then transcribe it and summarize it, but not just a general interview summary, but a skills-based interview summary that actually the same skills that you're assessing all throughout the interview, you get an output that says these are the candidates' strengths and points for growth in that same language by that same skills taxonomy, the interviewer's decision. It's the human decision. We amplify it with data, with insights, with feedback, but the decision is still a human decision.
I think that's exactly how most of these solutions, well, if not all of these solutions, should be designed, right? It's you're putting the human first, you're keeping it human centric, but you have technology as part of a decision support system to make sure, in part, that you didn't overlook anything, but also maybe just to check your own potential, biases, whether it's the time of day. That's really interesting observation that I hadn't really thought about. I know there are some, interview scheduling tools that make sure you have, they do load balancing, right? So no interviewer is spending more than, 5 hours a week doing interviews, and you're sort of spreading it around and you're making sure that the right people who have been trained in certain topics or certain types of interviews are, available depending on where someone is in the funnel. So there's a lot of logic that goes into that. But I like the tie to this concept of sort of the quantified self, right? Or if you don't measure it, you can't know what and how to improve what you're working on, or move towards the goals that you're trying to achieve. So it seems like there's incredibly valuable insight for the interviewer and the hiring team. Is there some output that goes to the candidate as well, or this is purely for the hiring team to make those decisions?
Yeah, so currently we've made it really easy for the interviewers, the recruiters, the hiring managers to provide feedback based on output that we're giving them in the system, because the output after every interview, but also at the end of the interview process, is something that we call a decision metrics that basically externalize in a very easy to understand way what is the skill level, what are the strengths, and what are the points for growth for each interviewer. So that is something that you can pick to the candidate and basically communicate to them. I will also say that I'm writing a lot of posts about it, and like we're also recommending it to all of our clients, people that have taken the time to participate in your interview process. I'm not talking about, maybe if it's just a phone screen or an initial assessment, okay, maybe you can send something written. But if they have taken the time to participate, to interview, you at least owe them a call and some feedback about, what they did well, and also why did you decide to move forward with other candidates, not just the generic one. I will say that we are planning as part of our product roadmap to also provide something written. But again, the technology human aspect of it, I don't think it's a substitute for a call where you're taking 5 minutes, 10 minutes from your time to say, thank you for taking the time. We really appreciate it. This is what we think are your strengths, and we were really impressed by this, but you still need to improve upon one, two, three. I personally do it with all of our candidates, and I find there are a bit that get defensive and kind of, but most of them are super appreciative. It just gives them something, that exactly the feedback loop that we've talked about, right? So now they know how they can improve for their next interview experience, and that's already something that they can work with.
Yeah, I would say of all the times that I've been a candidate myself, I would greatly appreciate that type of feedback so that I know I at least have something to walk away with, like sort of consolation prize, if you will. But yeah, anything that can help me do better next time, because otherwise the candidate is completely in the dark and could have thought everything went well and they built a good rapport, and the interviews overall gave them a stronger sense that they were the right fit for the role, and then nothing,
Yeah,
right? So I think just an eye to candidate experience and respect for the candidate and the time, to your point, that they have sort of committed.
exactly. Why should it be a black box? You know why you've made the decision. It might be hard to communicate, but at least some of it you can and you should uh, communicate. And another thing, I'm actually using it to assess growth mindset with recurring candidates. What do I mean by that? I just had a case of someone that I've rejected several months ago for a data analyst position on our team. I gave him the feedback, and then another position opened several months later. He applied again. I interviewed him, and he made such a significant leap. It was around communication capabilities. So I could actually see that he took my feedback and applied it in our interview. And I said, this is amazing. Like, you've made amazing progress, and I'm happy to move forward with you to the next stage. That is also a tool for companies in case of recurring candidates to actually see, were they able to take your feedback and implement.
What are your thoughts on what's happening in the space in terms of, there's been a backlash with the way DEI policies and teams were created. There's legislation coming for all of this potential AI solutions in the hiring process. Just curious to get your general thoughts about how we're evolving in the space. Are we going in the right direction?
Yeah, I will first talk about the positive things that I'm seeing, and then maybe a little bit. I don't know if to call it negative, but it is what it is. But first of all, I do see a general trend towards more standardized and data-driven hiring processes. A lot of talk around skills-based hiring, structured interviews, etc. So this is something that I'm very happy to see happening. And also there is a lot of flourishing of interview intelligence platform. We have a lot of competitors in our space, and I'm happy about it because it shows that there is a need, and that's an amazing thing. Also, up until, I don't know, 1 year ago, DEI, like, it wasn't a dirty word. It was actually something people strived to achieve. I think it still is that way, but there is a lot of backlash that kind of made people think, what is actually DEI? And like a lot of other initials, DI, DIB, DIJ, now with SHRM doing the change, inclusion first. So there is a lot of wording. And I feel, okay, I understand the essence of trying to make a difference with wording. But for me, the change is done through actions. So when a perplexed client comes to me and I can understand the confusion with it, with all of the buzz and the trends, the buzzwords, etc., what I try to bring it down to is eventually the essence, or what are the basic principles. I'll give an example just to clarify. So, for example, skills-based hiring. Okay. Also, I see some people like it. Some people say, "Oh, it's just a trend." What is skills-based hiring? It's knowing what you want to measure in your hiring process, having focus, and actually measure that and give more importance to that other than credentials. So there will be a lot of trends coming and going. Like, this is the pace of the world that we're living in, and it's okay. Eventually, what I try to ask myself and what I try to encourage others is to think about it in terms of what are the basic principles behind it, and do they serve you? Do they serve your goals?
Ultimately, this is where I see responsible AI and specifically how you mitigate bias, how you make more fair decisions, and the transparency that comes along with that. To me, that can elevate all of these other, somewhat controversial topics like DEI, because if you can mitigate bias at a scalable level, then better decisions start to be made. Of course, human decisions, but human decisions augmented by AI and all the data and all the insight that can be derived from that brought to bear at the point of a decision for human beings. To me, if we embrace this and do it the right way, again, responsible AI is more than just legislation, but certainly that is influencing people to some degree about how they govern the design and sort of construction of these solutions as well as how they're used. But to me, that lifts up all of these other more controversial subtopics, because the data, assuming the data is accurate and you've mitigated the bias in the data, then if someone still makes a biased decision, I mean, that's on them. But it just seems like you're not going to be successful with however you want to frame your DEIB initiatives. I don't see how you can be successful when AI will be used in some fashion, maybe even throughout the hiring, process. And it just seems like that's going to, surface some of these areas that need improvement and have needed improvement.
That's another infrastructure, right? Making sure that what we implement upholds a certain legal and ethical standard. And for me, as someone that doesn't know anything about the law but still strives to be ethical, what is the framework? So if I have laws and legislations, if I have professionals like you that can guide me through it, if I have platforms like ours that can monitor the bias and gradually reduce the bias in our processes, all of these are infrastructures that eventually helps us to get to where we want to get to. And specifically in the context of responsible AI, I would say it's about infrastructure for sure, but it's also about applying critical thinking. Because I think sometimes we see, the capabilities, the growing capabilities of AI, and we get blown away and we say, okay, wow, I have to use this, I have to implement this. Now, when you're an individual person sharing your own data, okay, get your own risk. But when you're sharing candidates' data, when you're sharing your organization's data, at least you owe it to the organization, to yourself, to the candidates, to the hiring managers, all of the stakeholders involved to stop and just ask yourself some questions about how is this making recommendations? What goes behind the scenes? How are you using the data? What happens to the data once we finish our communication? There are so many questions that needs to be asked, and I really recommend in that context to read a book called The Algorithm by Hilke Schillman, which is an HR tech, a journalist that now kind of went and deep dived into HR technologies and wrote a book about it. It's an amazing book that basically investigates or kind of inquires the different technologies and how they're working and how they're making decisions. And it also has an appendix at the end for talent acquisition or HR professional. Now, when you choose an AI vendor, these are the things that you need to take into consideration. These are the questions that you should ask. So I highly recommend it.
Absolutely agree. I actually was fortunate to meet Hilke a few weeks ago. I hope to have her on the show in the future. But yes, absolutely an important read for context about the broader space. And so, yeah, no, that's a great call out. As you think about AI and the fact that it's sort of on all our devices now, or soon will be, certainly everyone has access to it now. I'm just curious, more generally, even beyond your work, how if you have any favorite tools or use cases for some of the AI tools that we've been seeing.
I'm very curious to explore AI and what it can do. And I've been mainly experimenting with ChatGPT. I assume they have, since they came first, they kind of had that advantage. But also recently, also with Claude. So a lot of my use for it is around content writing because I do a lot of thought leadership on LinkedIn, on Forbes, etc. So it helps me brainstorm. It helps me refine my ideas and kind of take my more natural type of writing, which is kind of more, I would say professional, maybe a little bit academic, and turn it to something more engaging. So I think for writing content, it's amazing. Also, there are a lot of data analysis applications you can do on that. Of course, with being very aware of what you're putting in there and never putting anything that can identify anything. But there are a lot of data analysis functionalities that actually just save so much human time in terms of calculation and integrating between files and just things that took us a lot of time to do before it came about. I would also say that for companies that currently don't have the resources to invest in interview intelligence or in hiring intelligence, I do encourage to use AI to generate interview questions, but not to just like you really need to kind of develop your prompt engineering there. Because, like I said, initially what you'll get is standard questions, a lot of what's out there. Usually, what I will tell ChatGPT, when you develop a question, create some kind of a trade off. What do I mean? Like, don't just ask, when is the last time that you've achieved a goal or didn't achieve a goal. Now develop some kind of a dilemma where the candidate needs to decide or to trade off between being very process oriented to be goal oriented. Okay, so, and then it creates a question that requires much more thought, because there isn't a right and a wrong answer. All of a sudden, you need to take multiple considerations into account. So you can use it to develop interview questions, but just tinker with it and challenge it in order for it to provide you with more challenging interview questions. And also scoring rubrics. Scoring rubrics is something that GPT does fairly well. Again, you should give it the exact definition of what you're aiming to assess. So that's, I kind of went back again into the hiring context just to give something to hiring professionals. But wow, so many possibilities. Really, it is amazing.
Absolutely. And there's probably some people who have created some custom GPTs specifically for interviews. I haven't checked out the catalog, but I'm sure they exist.
Yeah, probably there are.
I did have one question about the future of interviewing, and maybe it's not the future, maybe it's happening now, but have you seen people incorporating questions about candidates' use of AI as part of the interview?
Yeah, that's actually what we're doing now. So for our own hiring, I'll give a specific example. So we're hiring a data analyst. So we give a professional task. Now, what we're saying at the instructions is, you are allowed to use AI, you are allowed to use ChatGPT, but tell us exactly where and how did you use ChatGPT? Because for us, the ability to use it and to tweak your work based on it is an advantage. It's not a disadvantage. We don't look at it like cheating. It's another tool. Why won't you use it? Or we have another part of the professional task saying, do something without AI, without GPT, and now do it with GPT. And we want to see what is the difference. So definitely, and also for the processes that we're building to our clients, that's how we encourage them to look at it, to actually integrate it already as a requirement within the hiring process.
That is a perfect answer. Because you're transparent with them, you're giving them explicit instructions. We know you're thinking about it, so yes, it's okay to use it. Just be transparent with us as to how you used it. So just anecdotally, my niece was applying for an internship and she had to do an assignment, and so I didn't know about it till she was almost done with the assignment. But when I talked to my brother, I said, "Did she use AI for the assignment?" And he was not keeping up with everything going on with AI at the time. And I said, "Let me show you this. Give me the assignment, put it in here, put it in ChatGPT, and then take the output of that, put it in Gamma, and create slides." And he was just absolutely blown away. He's like, "She spent like 3 or 4
Wow.
days working on this, and it just did this. It just did the entire assignment in less than 10 minutes."
Wow.
So I said she should submit and present the work that she did, but I would at some point acknowledge the fact that the technology has now advanced to the point where she didn't have to lose the weekend
Right.
um, to get this done. I'm not saying you just have AI do it and submit it, but just to have that as your first draft and then just tweak it, we could have saved an incredible amount of
I
time.
agree.
And so it shows initiative, it shows honesty, it shows initiative, it shows creativity, and she got the internship. So yeah, so she just showed at the end, the very last slide of her presentation, my understanding is she just had a side by side. To your point, here's what I did and all the time that it took each of these steps, and then here's what AI did and the time that saved. And my understanding is, if you're a management consulting firm, that's exactly what you want to see, because you're in the human capital
Exactly. If it
business.
saves me time, it saves the company time. We're all becoming more efficient. I could do more work. I can bring more revenue to the company. Everybody wins as long as it doesn't jeopardize the quality. And then I get back to the critical thinking component. That's like when I talk to candidates, I tell them, like, if you put it's okay to generate your CV through a GPT, but review it, make sure that it didn't put there something strange or dishonest or just like completely amplified something that you did in a non-realistic way. Be critical about it and make sure that you're in there, that you're represented in there, and even more so in a professional task where eventually, like, your flavor, your creativity, your thinking needs to be there. So put it in there, and then you can definitely tweak it with AI.
Absolutely. So my final question to you, Sharon, is tied to what we just talked about. But when you hear that phrase "elevate your AIQ," what's your advice? What do you think the keys are to everyone sort of upskilling themselves in this new technology?
So first of all, be curious. Okay, I don't think there is a person in the modern world that haven't heard ChatGPT or AI. Be curious, experiment with the different tools. There is so much out there that it is overwhelming. So I'm not saying go and experiment with all, but experiment with one, experiment with two, in your specific, for your specific needs and use cases. That's the way that you educate yourself. I think the key advantage here, even several years ago, when you went into a new platform, you had to learn it, you had to study it, you needed to gain theoretical information before you were able to dive in. Today, you just go in. It's so intuitive. So just learn, experiment, play with it, learn from it, and be critical about it. And that's the way that you can grow. I was about to say gradually grow, but I think what it allows you to grow so quickly, to grow your capabilities so quickly, and it's so easy and quick to learn. So just do it.
Excellent. Sharon, thank you so much for joining me today. I think there's a lot of takeaways from this, so I think the audience will really get a lot of knowledge and insight from this, and some good advice.
Thank you so much.
So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having
Absolutely.
me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise. So thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.